Tom Williams is the historian for the town of Malta, and he's going to share some of his research on the novelist Katherine Ann Porter, a Pulitzer Prize winner who lived for a time in Malta. Here you go, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Ann. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ann, and everybody. Thanks for coming out on this wintry afternoon. I want to tell you how I got interested in Katherine Ann Porter. I was appointed as historian of the town of Malta about 2 years ago, and my immediate predecessor, the late great Paul Perrault, was talking with me one day, and I was fishing around for topics to deal with. You like to pick 2 or 3 topics that you can dig deeply into, and for the benefit of not just the town, but everybody. And for some reason, somebody mentioned, I don't know, forgot who it was, mentioned Katherine Ann Porter, and said, oh, by the way, she was a resident of Malta. And whoa. And not only that, she was a Pulitzer Prize winner and won the National Book Award. And I thought, wow. And then I'd go around the town and I'd ask people, do you know about Katherine Ann Porter? And in most cases, people, went, whoops. No, they didn't. But of course, many of Malta's residents now are new residents, just moved in the last 5 or 10 years. And so that was expected. And so I began to dig into Katherine Ann Porter, and it was very interesting. I'm a writer by profession. I'm a former journalist, right up there with used car salesman. And this kind of struck me as an interesting topic. Here's a picture of Katherine Ann. I'm not sure where or when it was taken. Probably taken when she was in her maybe 60s. And it could have been taken at her house in Malta, but probably not. Probably later at the University of Maryland, where she developed some friends and later gave her papers. And so who was Katherine Ann Porter? Well, her birth name was Callie Russell Porter, and she was born in a tiny, not even wide spot in a road town called Indian Creek, Texas. It's in the central Texas, in the kind of the dry flatlands there. And she, excuse me, I've got to get, there, get your script, Tom, okay. She was I think the 4th of 5 children of a guy named Harrison Porter, who was a dairy farmer. And her mother died when Callie was 2. And her father, Harrison, then moved the 5 children to live in nearby Kyle, Texas, which is known, I guess, maybe even still as the pie capital of Texas. And it's a little bit southwest of Austin. And when they moved to Kyle, they moved in with Harrison's mother, who was also named Katherine Ann Porter, but with a different spelling, you'll note. And so Katherine Ann really loved her grandmother. Grandmother really took the place of her passed away mother. And later, Callie changed her name to Katherine Ann, the way it's spelled here, with a K and an E on the end of Ann. All right, this photo is not a joke. This is a photo I found, I guess, somewhere on the internet on one of those Chamber of Commerce sites or something. This is Indian Creek, about as it is today. When Katherine was born, it probably it was lucky if it had a population of maybe 100 people. And now it's way down from that. It may be no more than 25 or so people. And this is the kind of country that Katherine was born in. And I've said here, it's not even a wide spot in the road. Now, remember I said they moved to Kyle, Texas, and much later, after Katherine's death, the local people turned her house in Kyle, her family's house in Kyle, into a museum, which you see here. After several more moves, the family ended up in San Antonio. Now here's an amazing thing about Katherine Ann Porter. She never had a formal, like a college education. Her education ended in high school, but she was a very bright young woman, read widely, and later in her adulthood lectured at colleges and universities. And in 1906, at the tender age of 16, she married John Henry Coontz. And this was the first of 4 marriages, and it lasted the longest, 9 years. In 1912, now she was 16 when she got married the first time. In 1912, she first published a poem, Texas by the Gulf of Mexico. And in 1914, I think she got a little tired of John Henry and moved to Chicago. And she was a very beautiful young woman. She managed to get parts in a couple of silent films produced in Chicago. This is before the big era of filmmaking in Hollywood. And then she returned to Texas. In 1915, she contracted tuberculosis, and this kind of bothered her off and on for the rest of her life. But she managed to recover from that, and she really enjoyed writing, so she started as a journalist. Yay! Then in Chicago, she went on to other journalism jobs with the Fort Worth Critic, then with the Rocky Mountain News in Denver, and she was the Rocky Mountain News' theater drama critic. And then she went to New York City's Greenwich Village, and then followed some friends to Mexico and became an editor of a couple of English language publications there. And the experience in Mexico provided the inspiration for 3 short stories. The first one she wrote that gained acclaim was Marie Concepcion, and then there was a Martyr and the Virgin Violetta. In 1927, she got a call from a publisher and said, "Will you write a biography of Cotton Mather?" And she said, okay, but she never finished it. She was one of these people who had wide interests and was constantly moving around. She went to Bermuda and wrote a short story called Flowering Judas, which gained her some attention in the literary world. And then she went back to Mexico and wrote more, and finally got a little notoriety and earned a $2,000 scholarship from the Guggenheim Fellowship, and that improved her financial situation. One of her biographers, Beth Alvarez, of the Katherine Ann Porter Society, in a memo to me wrote, Katherine was a beautiful young woman full of self-confidence. And let's see here. Now, you may be most familiar with the novel she wrote called Ship of Fools, but that was the only novel she ever wrote. She was really a specialist in short stories. That's where she gained her notoriety and her later prizes. And so she and Eugene Presley, who became her, second or third husband, boarded a ship in Veracruz, and she took extensive notes on that voyage about the passengers, the crew, and all their idiosyncrasies. But she took the notes, but then kind of laid them aside for many years and worked on the novel on and off. I've read the novel. It's a big, thick thing. It's about 500 pages, small type, and I can understand why it took her a while. But anyway, the book was not published until 1962. Again, remember, she first took the notes in 1931. Then she became pretty well known for a series of 3 short stories called Pale Horse, Pale Rider. One was a short story of that name, another one called Noon Wine, another one called Old Mortality. And these were based on what she had experienced growing up in rural Texas. And that built her reputation as one of America's better writers. And okay, now you're asking, why Malta? In 1940-41, she stayed at Yaddo in Saratoga Springs. She was probably invited there because of her gain in notoriety. And she was there with other writers, and then one day she took an auto trip with another friend of hers, and around Saratoga Lake, January 41, she saw what she called her dream house on Kramer Road in Malta. I don't know if you're familiar with Kramer Road, but it's there are 2 parts of Kramer Road, one on the east side, running off the east side of Route 9, and the other running off the west side. And this house was on the east side of Kramer Road, 165 Kramer Road. She called it her dream house. She bought it for $2,000, or about $43,000 in today's money. I challenge you to find any house in Malta today that's selling for $43,000. It may be a manufactured home or something, but it's that's a bargain today. She named it South Hill. Here's this house today. It's a picture I took. This is looking at it from the southeast, looking from the southeast toward the northwest. And the beautiful house is built in the Georgian style. And I took these pictures, the current owners invited me inside. I took these pictures. The one on the right kind of is emblematic of how the house is decorated today, but it's the current owners have tried to maintain the spirit of Katherine Ann Porter and how she lived there. And it's very tastefully decorated. It's just very impressive the way they have maintained the house. The left-hand photo looks at the house from the west side. Whoops. Whoop. Okay. At South Hill, she had developed a friendship with Eudora Welty, a pretty famous writer at that time, who visited her there. And at South Hill in Malta, she resumed work on Ship of Fools, the novel, but didn't finish it there. She made a comment how the house heals her hurts, inspires her creativity, and grounds her. And then the house needed some rehab work, not horrible, but it was, like all houses, older houses, it needed some work. And she started in doing that herself. She bought some tools, probably from the local Malta hardware store. And I have another photo, which I don't have here, but it shows Katherine Ann standing next to a cement mixer. And She did a lot of this work herself, but I'm sure she had friends and neighbors who helped her out. And then she got kind of lonely. This was during World War II. Malta at that time was a very rural town. I've developed some research showing that by the time she moved there, the population of Malta wasn't much larger than it was when the town was founded in 1802. It had always remained a very rural town full of farmers and a few businesses that served them. And so finally she got kind of lonely after about I don't know, 13 or 14 months in the house, and she decided to move out. And the house basically remained vacant until 1946, when it was purchased by George and Florence Willison, and we'll talk about them a little later in what I called our bonus round, your second Malta famous writer. And she remained good friends with the Wilsons. Here's Katherine Ann in the field to the west of South Hill. It's, as I said, it was built in what's called the modified Georgian style. And we think it may have been built as early as 1830, but the records show that we didn't see a family there until about 1857. It was a farm family named the Hills. And interestingly enough, when Katherine Ann Porter bought the house in 1941, she bought it from a descendant of the Hill family. The family had been there, 90 years or something. And it's now a Malta town landmark. Here's a letter that she sent from South Hill to her nephew, who became her inheritor of her estate. And I'll just read it for you, maybe if you can't see it. She says, "I have been absolutely alone here, except for the Russian-Polish neighbors down the road, whose children drop by and say good day now and then, since last Wednesday morning." I didn't know there were Russian-Polish people in Malta. "I spend some time every day polishing my house a little. It is getting into fine order. I read and write letters and rest and think and plan my work, and my energy seem to be coming back, and my mind is getting into a good steady rhythm." Then she says, "I needed this quiet and this solitude. There has been a great deal of pleasant but quite aimless excitement and too much distraction. Now with this preparation, I mean to begin the new year with real work. Wish me luck. There is so much to do. Signed, Aunt Katherine Ann." Again, remember, she was living alone there, and she had to be, she was a pretty self-reliant gal, but, it may have involved a lot of work. Here's the landmark sign in front of the house at 165 Kramer Road. It notes several families that lived there, right down to the ones who bought it from Katherine Ann. Going into her later life, she finally finishes Ship of Fools in about 1962. I want to read you something interesting. Anyway, the gist of the quote was in about 1959, when she was still working on the tail end of the novel, a reporter came up to her and said, "Now, when are you going to finish your book, Katherine?" Now remember, she'd been working on Ship of Fools novel since 1931, or 1940 if you want to count, don't count the first bunch of notes. She said something like, she was a classic Texas gal. She said, "Now, this is none of your business. I'll finish my novel when I'm ready to, And you just wait, and it'll come out soon enough. And I'm sure the reporter blushed a little bit, but so in '62, the book is finally published by Little Brown. It was a bestseller, and she sold the rights for $400,000 over about $5 million or $4 million today to the Hollywood producer Stanley Kramer. And then they make the movie, and in '65, it arrives in theaters, gets a generally decent welcome from the critics, and except for maybe a couple of snotty critics in New York City, I don't know. But it got 2 Oscars for art direction and cinematography. It was nominated in 6 other categories, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Oscar Werner, and Best Actress Simone Signoret. Here are the cast members. It starred no less than Vivian Leigh, Simone Signoret, Jose Ferrer, Lee Marvin, Oscar Werner, Elizabeth Ashley, George Segal, Jose Greco, and Michael Dunn, and many others. In the book, if you read the book starts out with a list of her characters. And if you ever have read a Shakespeare play, you know that at the start of every one of his plays, he has a list of characters who will be in the play. And this was the same kind of thing. She listed all these different characters that she was going to write about. And I found myself constantly going back to this list to find out, now, Mr. So-and-so, now, what was he? And then she, so it was very helpful. But anyway, what is the book about? Well, I read the book. It's the ship was carrying many different kinds of people, but they seemed to have one thing in common. They wanted to escape disappointment or loneliness in the New World and restart their lives in Europe. A lot of the people, especially the first-class passengers, were German expatriates, sort of upper-class Germans, and they make no bones in the text about their dislike for Jews and other racial minorities. And Katherine Ann Porter doesn't dwell on this too much, but she does note it. And if you recall, the voyage that she based this on was in 1931, but she didn't finish it until 1961 or 2. And by the time she finished the novel, we were well aware of the awful things that had happened in Europe due to the Nazis and the fascists in Italy. So, I thought, well, the title Ship of Fools is kind of appropriate because a lot of bad things happened in Europe in the 1930s. And you wonder, did these people know about all this stuff? Did they, as they were on their way to Germany? And so a whole bunch of bad things started to happen in the 1930s in Europe. And of course, World War II starts in 1939. In her later life, she was active as a lecturer, writer at American universities. She kept working on the ship novel until 1962, but then as the notoriety of the ship novel and later the movie came out, she was invited to the White House by Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. And then in 1965, she received the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, not for Ship of Fools, the novel, but for her collection of short stories. I've read a few of these short stories. They're wonderful stories, very kind of based somewhat on her growing up in Texas, but they're very well written and the characters are very powerfully drawn. And then in the last 10 years of her life, she did some interesting things. She talked to Playboy, and they asked her to write a novel about Apollo 17, the last of the Apollo shots. And that went off in, I think, 1972 or something. But, and then she did finish that. She never finished that, but she did write a book about the Sacco-Vanzetti affair. And finally, her death occurred in 1980. She was 90 years old, had a good long life, and she was very well traveled. This is a list of some of the places she lived during her life, in addition to Texas and Mexico. And you can go down the list. Massachusetts, Bermuda, Paris, Greenwich Village, Madrid, Switzerland, Pennsylvania, New Orleans, Cold Spring, New York, a little burg on the Hudson. And the house is now owned by a couple, Sheldon and Michelle Gantz. Sheldon's a CPA, Michelle is a retired piano teacher. And when they moved into the house, they were aware of a tradition that had been started by Katherine Ann Porter, in which you went out and found a turkey feather and lit it up and waved it across the backyard to get the bad spirits out and the good spirits in to the property. Here's Michelle and what did I say? Sheldon and Michelle on their porch. Very nice couple. They were very kind to me, let me in to the house to take pictures and so forth, and were very interesting to talk to. And they are very immersed in the history of that house, especially Katherine Ann Porter's presence there. By the way, South Hill, that house was the only house that Katherine Ann Porter ever owned. Everywhere else she stayed in hotels or friends' houses or what have you. And she's got quite a legacy. She left her papers to the University of Maryland. There's a Katherine Ann Porter room at the McKelvin Library at the campus, College Park, Maryland. She didn't have any children, but on her death, her nephew, Paul Porter Jr., remember I quoted the letter she had written to him from South Hill, he kind of took custody of her estate. And there's now a Katherine Ann Porter Society based at the University of Maryland. And they were very helpful in my research. They were really nice. Now, here's your bonus round for your second Malta writer. This is George F. Willison, who bought the property from Katherine Ann Porter in 1946. And George had quite a resume. He studied, he was a Rhodes Scholar, and he studied at Sorbonne in Paris. He was in the U.S. Army during World War I. And he wrote about American history. He wrote a book about the Mayflower Pilgrims, nonfiction, and about Patrick Henry, the famous patriot. George was a staunch Democrat. He started writing for various Washington administrations in the 30s, starting with FDR's administration. Then he became a speechwriter later for U.S. Senator Estes Kefauver of Tennessee and New York Governor Averell Harriman. And he was a member of the Malta Democratic Committee and once ran for the Malta Town Board. Full disclosure, I was once a member of the Malta Democratic Committee. And it was quite an experience. I was there for about 4 years. And I never ran for the town board, but I've got a project going now, a different project about the history of the town board. But that caught my eye, I have to say. And then George died in Saratoga Hospital in 1972. His wife, Tony, lived at South Hill until 1997. I don't know, I repeated myself here, but Tony was an election official in Malta for several years. That kind of makes sense. She was probably a Democrat too. And there's always been, right up until recently, a shortage of Democratic election inspectors in Malta because it's a very Republican town, or has been. This is a picture of George Willison, and he looks like a serious, studious guy, but he was a smoker. I have no explanation for that. And that's the end of the show. I thank you for coming. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Does anybody have any questions? No questions. Holy cow. Thank you very much. Again, this was a very interesting topic to research because even today, you go around Malta and you say, "Do you know who Katherine Ann Porter was?" And usually they, draw a blank. And so it's been fun to kind of enlighten the community a little bit about her. It's not about the revolution, but it's an important part of our history, I think. And so thank you very much. And by the way, I want to mention before I stop that I've been attending some of your programs in the past year, for the last couple of years. You guys do a tremendous job. You bring in some remarkable speakers, present company excluded. You do a great job in bringing in real experts, and I commend you for that. So thank you very much. And yes.
Just one question. Early on in your presentation, it mentioned that you was at Ghetto in 1940 with other writers.
Yeah.
Who they were?
Well, one of them was Eudora Welty, which she became close friends with. A few others were there at Yaddo. I think Truman Capote was one of them, but he never, I don't think he ever became close friends with her, but she knew him. And there were a few, other famous names like that at Yaddo at the time. And so, she had vaulted into the realm of America's best writers, by the early 1930s. And that's interesting because as a woman, she was kind of in the minority among the writing community in those days. Most of the big writers, Hemingway, Faulkner, Fitzgerald, etc., were men, and it was thought kind of unusual for a woman to be famous like that as a writer. But she was a tough little Texas gal. I always like to say, in my family, we had a word to describe people like that. A tough, feisty woman was a pistol. I think Katherine Ann was a pistol. Yeah.
Were any of your husbands famous?
No. They were famous for ticking her off, but.
And one other question. Now, she must have had a lot of nieces and nephews. How come one got the estate?
How come the nephew got the estate?
She must have had a lot of nieces and nephews.
Yes. I think Paul Porter Jr., the one who got the estate, he was a favorite of hers. There were other nephews. Exactly, why she chose him is I'm not sure of. But she treated him, she kind of treated him like a child, So can't quite answer your question, but yeah.
Did you ever run into Frida Kahlo and her name from her time in Mexico?
No, I didn't. The famous painter. Yeah. No, I didn't. It's very possible she knew Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo was the famous painter who had the unibrow. But very, very accomplished painter, and is still recognized today as one of the world's finest painters. Yes?
I just wondered, maybe I missed it, but where did she move to after she sold the house?
Well, she immediately, to stem her loneliness, I guess, she moved down to Cold Spring, New York, which is a little burg almost opposite West Point on the Hudson. But then she had developed friendships all over. There was a town in Connecticut where she lived. She had friends in Pennsylvania. So she kind of hopped around to different places to meet her friends and hopefully gain some peace of mind writing and so forth. So I ran a list of the places where she had been, and she pretty much lived, I say lived, I mean for a few months or more in each of those places. What's that?
She was a vagabond.
Well, she was a very lively, we're looking through the material on her. I think she was a very lively gal who made friends easily, very talkative, and everybody who met her, I think, liked her. She was this little Texas pistol. Any, yes? Don't have your hand up. All right. Anybody else with a question? Yeah?
Not related to the presentation here, but if someone wanted to do some research in your office, you have regular office hours, where are they?
Okay, I am typically in my office weekday afternoons. I'm a late sleeper. But no, I'm usually there, say, after 1 o'clock on weekdays. Typically, not every weekday necessarily, but I'm there, and I'll take calls there. I'll, if you just want to walk in the door and start asking questions or want to see a file or something like that, I get some interesting questions from the public, now and again. There's this fellow who called me up recently, and he said, my great-grand niece, I guess it was, wrote a little diary. It's about this big. And you guys put it on display in your library once upon a time. Do you still have that little? Well, I'll tell you, we've got a lot of stuff in there that's been given to us by all kinds of people in Malta and elsewhere. And I promised him I would look for that little diary. I haven't found it yet, but if I do, I'm sure it'll be fascinating, Anybody else? And, again, feel free to walk in and say hello. My direct phone line in the office there is 518-720-3592, and or my email is tWilliams@townofmaltany.gov, and please feel free to email me if you like. Anybody else? I want to thank Dave Waite for his technical assistance, and Ginny Humphrey for also being a technical assistant and asking me to do this, and Ann Holmutter, who I think took off. She was, maybe she got bored or something. No, Ann has been very, very helpful at the History Center on a lot of different things, and I want to mention her. And John Scherer, who, John, you've answered a lot of my questions, and you've done some great work down there in Clifton Park. So, anything else, or Jenny?
You mentioned mentioned that a student was borrowing some materials from your office.
The young man who was a senior at Siena University, formerly Siena College, and he wanted to get information on the rocket test site that was established in Luther Forest back in the late 40s. And I gave him a pile of stuff, and he apparently gave a presentation about that to his classmates down at Siena. And then he returned them all. A very nice fellow. And I thought, gee, if I ever hire, if we ever ask an intern to come down here, he'd be one of them. But, you know, I don't let stuff out of the office easily. I prefer to, you know, these things are the property of the town of Malta. Many of them are irreplaceable and valuable, so I prefer to be very careful about that. He's the only one really who's taken so far material out of our files, and he returned every single piece of.
Did you get a copy of his presentation?
I'm sorry I didn't. I planned to go there, but and watch it, but something came up and I didn't make it. But he, just a very sharp guy, very bright guy, and I'm sure he did a great job. He was, I don't know if you know, but my predecessor, the late Paul Perrault, did quite a presentation on the rocket test site at Brookside, AKA the History Center, in November, just before he passed away. He passed away in January of 2025, and in November, I think it was, of 2024, he gave an excellent presentation to a full house at Brookside. And when he passed away, I had to sit down for that one because he had been a mentor. He had been there a long time as a historian. His fingerprints were all over our files. I mean, he did extraordinary research in the time, I don't know, 10 years or so he was there. So I really miss him. He was a friend and a mentor. Anybody else? Yeah.
I just want to say one thing, there's a lot of genealogy magazines on the table in the back, they're free for anybody to take, so look through, see if there's something that will help you move your research forward.
Yeah. I apologize, I'm not a genealogy expert. I've tried to go on various genealogy sites, and depending upon how accessible my credit card is, I try to get on a few of them, but I did some work, this past year I did a lot of work on a list of people from Malta who were soldiers in the revolution. At first, the town board got me into this. One day they asked me, hey, who from Malta was at the battles of Saratoga? And I thought, well, that can't be that hard to find. And, well, you know the answer to that. So I dug away for months. There's an interesting site that I didn't know about called fold3.com. You probably have heard that, which has lists of soldiers from all different American wars. That was somewhat helpful. And actually the most helpful bunch of data were cemetery lists. There's about, 5 or 6 different cemeteries in the town of Malta. And a number of revolutionary veterans are buried, scattered in those. But, you know, the problem is that during the revolution, there was no town of Malta. It was part of the original town of Stillwater. And so I found myself asking myself, now, was this guy, all men, you know, did he live in what's now Malta, or did he live over, you know, Mechanicville or someplace? And so it was a kind of a tough road to find out, you know, who these guys were, but they all had interesting histories. One guy was a prisoner of war. Then there's the famous General Samuel Chase, who was the first supervisor of the town of Malta. He was a Revolutionary veteran, and I think he was at the battles of Saratoga along with 2 or 3 other people from Malta. Erich Schnitzer, the historian at the Saratoga battlefield, was very helpful. He sat me down one day and he said, guess what? He said, you know the difference between the militia and the regular army, right? And I said, yeah. He said, there were militia at the battles of Saratoga, but they were never involved in battle. They were held back in reserve while the regular army tackled the British. And that was interesting, because, of course, you know that the militias were sometimes reliable, sometimes not, but they helped boost the soldier count so that General Gates could go to Burgoyne and say, now look at all these guys I've got, you don't have a chance, Anybody? Dave, thank you for all your help. And I told Dave and Ann that back in 7th grade in Rochester, New York, I was on a 2-man audio-visual team at our elementary school. And in those days, we worked on reel-to-reel film. And so this is quite a step up. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.